Thanks to everyone for joining in, and I'm very grateful for the work that all of you are doing to build to build schools where there is a culture of character. It's really important work, and thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with everyone. Okay, hopefully that's up for everyone. Again, my name is John Lowry. I'm here in Homewood, Alabama. I'm a recovering elementary school principal. I spent 11 years at Shades Cahaba Elementary, and had the privilege of working with a great group of teachers, staff members, students, and parents, and we were able to make character a priority. Everyone bought in, and they helped us do that every day. So now I work in our central office, and I get to work with our counselors across all of our schools, and we're continuing that work. This quote is from Terrell Bell. He was Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Education, and this was 40 years ago, and he said, in education, we've got to prioritize motivation. And if you can unlock that puzzle, then you're going to do great things in your school. In 2012, Shades Cahaba we went through National School of Character application process for our second time, and we were awarded the designation of a school of character. And in our review from our evaluation from our reviewer, this was what was noted, that we needed to do a better job of making intrinsic motivation kind of a character goal across our school. So we dug into that. So the forthcoming slides, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about our journey with that and what we focused on and how we tried to address that specific challenge. Principle 7 says a culture of character emphasizes intrinsic motivation rather than recognition or material rewards. So our struggle and our challenge with this was how do we do this through the lens of character education? Can you just address intrinsic motivation through character education without addressing the academic component of that? So what we decided to do as a school is to take a holistic approach to this and just work on building intrinsically motivated students. And we felt like if we worked on that, learned about it, and applied what we learned, then it would show up both academically and behaviorally for our students. But before I go any further, I have to give a disclaimer here. I'm not a researcher. I spent a few years really digging into this, but I'm a practitioner. So, all of the research I did, I've then tried to turn around and apply it to what we were doing in our school. So, just take my information, with that in mind, as you listen. So motivation defined is it's really hard to measure. So how do you measure motivation? So you have to look at the actions of the students, and you have to make the best inference you can there based on how people are acting. You can ask students to report their motivation, but that has some pros and cons to that as well. And there's different types of motivation. There's motivation to begin something, and then there's the motivation to sustain an action. And we've heard a lot about that over the past couple of years, and we frequently hear the word grit, and that's what grit is talking about, is that sustained motivation to continue working towards a goal. And it's situational. It varies from situation to situation. It's not a black or white issue. We just are about to go through compliance monitoring here in our district. I'm not very motivated to do that, but I may be really motivated to go out and do a bit of fishing this weekend. So those, again, it's very situational and can vary from student to student as well. The another way to measure motivation is to look at academic outcomes, because there's a plethora of research that shows that there is a high correlation between intrinsic motivation and academic scores. So if your academic scores are increasing, you can make a pretty safe assumption that there's more intrinsic motivation there as well. So that was one of the ways that we really set out to kind of identify, or is what we're doing working? What's our academic situation? What's our data telling us? And the graph there shows a specific intervention where students were taught about motivation, were taught about mindset, were taught about how to have that sustained motivation, and their academic scores increased. The group that was taught about that showed an increase in their academic scores. All that just to kind of underscore the correlation between intrinsic motivation and positive academic outcomes. So there's a handful of theories on education that I'm going to go through, and this can hopefully give you some information and knowledge about why people do things the way that they do them, and may help frame some of the things that you see in your school, give you some language to understand that as well. So the four main theories that I'm going to talk about are the expectancy value theory, the attribution theory, the self-determination theory, and then Carol Dweck's goal theory as well. So the first one is expectancy value theory. And this theory explains motivation through a combination of task, interest, and value, and then your expectation of success. So, for example, you love playing basketball and you practice consistently because you can improve. So you have a high expectancy there. And you enjoy competing and you enjoy basketball. So you have a combination of high expectations and high value. So that leads to high levels of motivation. Conversely, you may not want to volunteer for a school play because you don't think you're a good actor. So you have low expectancy and you really don't see the benefit for yourself in putting yourself out there like that. So low value as well. So there's low motivation there. And there's a few attributes that are really important to expectancy value theory. The interest is really important. The efficacy, to what degree do you feel like you can produce the desired results of the activity? And then again, how much do you value the task? The second one is attribution theory. And the attribution theory explains motivation through individuals' perceptions of success and failure in activities. So when we're completing tasks or engaged in activities, we're constantly trying to find reasons for our successes and our failures. Those reasons that we give to either being successful or failing are attributions. So, and the type of attributions we make to successes or failures influence our future actions and our future decisions. So, and there's, you can have a variety of different variables that exist to help you explain those attributions. If you attribute things to internal or external variables. Internal variables are things that you can control. External variables are things that you don't really have control. Was the condition of your success or failure due to something stable, or was it due to something unstable? If it's stable, you don't think it's likely to change in the future. Unstable conditions mean that the outcome could change in the future. To what degree can you control those variables? If you have control over those variables, that's a better condition for being motivated over something that you don't feel like you can control. So all of those conditions, that internal, external locus of control, the stability of the situation, and the controllability of the situation, kind of all mingle together and help you make attributions about successes and failure, and then therefore influence future decisions. So an example of this might be a student receives an A on a test in history class. They could attribute their success to hard work and effective study methods. All three of those things are internal, they're controllable, and it's unstable because it could change in the future if they don't repeat the same process. So that student's likely to reproduce that in the future because it led to success. That would be an example of high motivation. If the student did poorly on the test and attribute it to, the test was too hard and I'm just not good at this. Those are external, uncontrollable, and a stable attributions for their failure. So they're not going to be very motivated there. The type of feedback that students get can really influence those attributions. Again, their efficacy, to what degree can they influence and have the desired result. And then autonomy as well is an important factor here. Do I have, again, control over this situation? The next one is the self-determination theory. It kind of grew out of the beginnings of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation research. And what you need to remember about self-determination theory is ABC. And self-determination theory kind of says that the need for three basic psychological aspects contribute to our motivation. And it's ABC: autonomy, belonging, and then competence. So belonging is the need to feel connected to others and have meaningful relationships. Competence is the need to feel effective and master new skills. And then again, autonomy, the need to feel like you have control over your decisions and your actions. When these three factors or needs are met, then it leads to people being engaged and more intrinsically motivating because the activity itself is enjoyable. Conversely, if these needs are unmet, then you're likely going to look to something external in order to keep you moving towards a specific goal in that area. A student, for example, for self-determination theory, a student who loves learning science and enjoys the challenge of solving problems, their intrinsic motivation is related to the enjoyment they get and their need for having a sense of competence, that C part of the ABC. A student who only studies science to avoid maybe a bad grade, that's an example of being extrinsically motivated there because of that external pressure there. It's not something that they're doing strictly for the enjoyment of the activity. The next one is goal theory, and this is Carol Dweck's research. And she explains that we basically have two goal orientation. We want to learn or we want to perform. And learning goals, students who have learning goals and are motivated by learning goals want to increase their competence and improve their skills. They're interested in learning new things, mastering challenges, and expanding their knowledge. Performance goals, on the other hand, They're primarily motivated to demonstrate competence so that they can either accomplish something or gain approval from others. Achieving higher grades, outperforming others, and then avoiding negative evaluations would be sort of some specific examples of performance goals. Learning goals, students who have learning goals are associated with much higher levels of intrinsic motivation, much higher levels of engagement, and that word grit, persistence, and sustaining their motivation is much higher. Students with learning goals are more likely to enjoy a challenge, embrace failure as an opportunity to learn, and continue, again, to show effort even when they're faced with challenge. Students who have performance goal orientation can lead to anxiety. It can instill a fear of failure and therefore a reluctance to take risk and try new things. Students with performance goal orientations are more likely to avoid challenges. They're going to be more discouraged by setbacks and then focus more on short-term gains rather than long-term learning. There's lots of factors that can influence the orientation that a student might adopt. The classroom environment, teacher behavior, parental expectations, all of those things are going to factor into the goal theory as well. Again, we talked about the goals. The feedback that the teacher gives can help push a student towards one orientation or the other. Their own sense of identity and do I have performance goals or do I have learning goals? And then to what degree of how competent am I in this activity? So you can see that there's lots of different factors that we talked about in all those different theories, and they can show up as contributing to either extrinsic motivation or intrinsic motivation. And for example, the level of challenge in a task, if it's the right fit for the student, it can increase intrinsic motivation. If that challenge is too difficult, then you lose that intrinsic motivation and then have to rely on something external to do that. So you can just kind of get a brief example there of some of the factors that play into these two like opposite ends of the spectrum of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So in a school then, if we know all these things about the different theories and what drives people to initiate an activity or sustain an activity, how do we set up an environment so that students have more intrinsic motivation? So the first two are the atmosphere, and the physical atmosphere in the building and the cultural atmosphere in the building. So you want in physical setting, the less distractive the environment is, the more conducive that is to fostering intrinsic motivation. Having interesting and relative visual aids is helpful. The more organized something is versus chaotic, the more conducive that is to producing an environment where intrinsic motivation is fostered. And then cultural atmosphere, is the school warm and accepting? Is the classroom warm and accepting? Is the relationship between the adults in the building and the students in the building positive? Is it collegial? And are the teachers in the building enthusiastic? So all of those things contribute to setting up an environment that can foster intrinsic motivation. Some of the things that were helpful for us at Shades Cahaba, and these are a couple of cultural examples that we kind of put in place. This is a picture of Miles here, and and Russell, Miles is the human, Russell is the animal. I started doing just birthday selfies with all of our kids every day. So if it was their birthday, I would go pull them out of class, get the dog, and we would do a little selfie, and I would, you know, pat them on the back and send a text to their parents and just say, happy birthday to Miles. Hope he has a great day. And it was one little thing that I could do as a principal of a school to kind of build that warm culture to help the students understand that they're seen and important. One of the other things that we did was we created nest groups, which were multi-age group, really classrooms that were separate from, you know, their typical classroom teacher. We met once a week for about 45 minutes on Friday mornings, and the same, your nest group was consistent. It never changed, and was you stayed with your nest group your entire time at Shades Cahaba. And really the purpose of it was to build good relationships. There was no academic pressure in these nest groups. So it allowed a little bit of a different relationship between the adults and the students in the classroom. In addition, it gave us an opportunity to have a period of time set aside to talk about character and to talk about our core values. So we would do some of those lessons in these nest groups, and have our fifth graders model and take some ownership into some of that instruction. So that was another really important cultural piece that happened. So some of the more curriculum related activities, and again, as we talk through these, you're going to see how so many of these things just are going to relate over to making good decisions behaviorally as well. So lots of the things that we're going to talk about, you know, are the research on this is specific to academic motivation, but it translates, it carries over into how your students respond to each other and to the adults as well. So some of the things for curriculum related techniques, explaining how information is relevant to student lives, that builds interest in as we talked about those different theories, task value and interest is so important in building intrinsic motivation. Helping students understand the context of information and being able to relate it to other experiences or even previous learning is going to help build that sense of competence for students. Giving students the opportunity to build on their strengths can build a sense of competency with your students, and giving students the opportunity to have choice as much as possible is going to build that sense of autonomy. So all of these things are factors that showed up in all of those different theories of motivation there. A little bit more on the curriculum related techniques. The pacing of a lesson that you create for your students, having the opportunity for students to have a variety of different settings, alternate active with quiet activities, allow students to move, allow students to be still, vary that up as much as feasible. Encourage active participation with your students. Don't tell them something that you can ask them to figure out or point them in a direction to go find their answer to a specific question. Again, that's going to build that competence there. Relationship building techniques, take interest in your students. The more that you know about them and the more that they know that you care, the more intrinsically motivated they're going to be. It goes back to that self-determination theory and the need to have a sense of belonging. And the more interest you show and show your students that they belong in your classroom, the more intrinsically motivated they're going to be. And again, an important part to this is to really take care of yourself as a teacher. If you're frustrated, if you're not feeling well, if you're not in a good spot, it's really hard to do these things effectively for your students as well. In the feedback part, that was an important component of the different types of or different theories of motivation. The feedback that you give students can really orient them to in one direction or the other. So when you are providing feedback, whether it's for making a good decision related to behavior and character, or whether it's feedback on a specific task in an academic situation, praise their effort, praise improvement, and be very thoughtful and intentional and careful with your criticism, and do that in a private way for students. When you're giving grades, and I know this is gonna vary from school district to school district, because you have grades have to be based on certain benchmarks, and some school systems have more autonomy for their teachers there than others. But to the degree that you can, consider effort in grades and not just outcome. That really will help orient students more towards that learning orientation, into having more of that intrinsic motivation. Give positive feedback, even if the outcome is not great, as long as that effort's high. Praise the effort again, and then problem solve with the student. Okay, you worked really hard, the outcome wasn't what you wanted. How can we correct this moving forward? Like, what sort of strategies and things can we do, can you apply to help you maybe have a better outcome next time? That gets their interest, builds that competency, gives them more of a sense of efficacy, all important parts in building intrinsically motivated students. And then let's talk about rewards, because this is a tricky subject, and can divide people into the camp of no rewards or we're going to reward, and it's not quite as simple as that. So what we know about rewards is that students who are rewarded for doing activities are more likely to expect an extrinsic reward in the future. So they almost become dependent on that in order to want to do what they're supposed to do in those situations. So the more the more that they do it for the enjoyment of the activity, or because it's something that was a positive experience, the more likely they are to continue doing it for those same reasons in the future and be more intrinsically motivated. One of the studies that's interesting here with rewards is a group of students were brought into an art room where they were observed the number of how many times during free play were they picking art as an activity. So they just took track of that and noted it, and then they brought the students back into the classroom and offered some of the students a reward for doing art, and then the other students they didn't. So when they brought those groups back in after kind of applying a different reward to each of those groups, the children who were told to expect a reward the first time were significantly less likely to complete the art activity moving forward. So the introduction of that reward really sort of crushed their intrinsic motivation there. And that's been a replicated study over and over. So when you're thinking about rewards, there's really three questions that you want to think about there. Is intrinsic motivation relevant is the first question. Most of the time, it is going to be relevant. We want our students to be intrinsically motivated. We want them to make good decisions for how they treat others. We want them to make good decisions academically, and we want them to do that because it's the right thing to do, or because they have a desire to learn or get better, not because of an external reward. So the first question is intrinsic motivation relevant? Does the child already enjoy the task or not? There could be differences there. You know, you have students who really enjoy math and some students who don't enjoy math. So it's important to take that into consideration. Something that's very simple and task-oriented, like cleaning up after art, we want them to do that, but it may not be as important. The intrinsic motivation may not be as important in that task as making a good decision to show respect to a classmate in a, group project, something like that. So you've got to take that into consideration and make a decision about how important the intrinsic motivation is in that situation. Question 2, is the reward necessary or is it superfluous? Does the child already enjoy the task without complaint? If they do, there's no reason to reward them. Just give them feedback on the activity. If the answer is no, if they do not enjoy the task, then it may be wise to initially reward the outcome that you want, and then slowly phase that away as the student becomes more proficient at the skill, the behavior, the activity there as well. And then question 3 is, will the child perceive the reward to be a bribe or a bonus? So when you think about this, what do humans typically have to be bribed to do? Fun things or boring, painful things? It's the painful thing. So students know this, kids know this. So a lot of times, just with the introduction of a reward, you're sending the message that this is a painful, not fun thing to do, because I'm rewarding you for doing it, and we get rewarded when we complete things that aren't always fun or boring. So that's something to consider as well. Consider what's required for the reward, and if you are going to use rewards, do it intermittently so that it doesn't become an expectation of those students. And then think about the relative value of the reward to the task at hand, or what you're asking your students to do there. The more valuable that the child perceives the reward to be, the more likely that the child is going to assume that the task is not fun. So that's an important consideration in rewards. Again, we talked about this in that second question. If a decision is made to reward, try to come up with a structure and plan to phase those rewards out. So reward successive approximations, and then keep that up until you have a habit established there. And then phase those rewards out in an intermittent and unexpected way. And then if you need to substitute a new skill in, then that would be the time to do that once you've kind of phased out that old reward there. So our answer to this was we came up with character cards. So we had our core values and the expectations for how we lived and learned at Shades Cahaba. And Morgan here has a couple of character cards there. And what we decided to do for a school-wide approach to recognize good behavior and reinforce that and good character in our students was the character card. So if an adult or a student saw another student really doing something that displayed or showed that we were doing something reflective of our core values. Like one of hers is she showed self-control. So one of ours was take charge of yourself. You are responsible for you. So the green character card, someone saw her taking charge of herself. So when you got your card, you could just clip it on your backpack. And then the job of the adults in the building was then to follow up and have a conversation with that student. Oh, you showed self-control. Tell me about how you did that. How did that make you feel? And all of those questions and those follow-up conversations were really in an effort to help her internalize the behavior and help her have a sense of efficacy and control over that, so that it became something that she would be intrinsically motivated to do rather than extrinsically motivated. So that was something that we did that worked pretty well for us. Again, there's a few little bullet points there of different things you can do to foster that growth mindset and intrinsic motivation. And this is just kind of a review of all the things we talked about through the different theories and those different cultural and curriculum related techniques there. So any questions, comments, or feedback? I'm happy to answer questions or go into more detail in one specific area.
Thank you. That was awesome. Anybody have any questions? You can speak up or write your question in chat for Dr. Lowry. Who would like to ask a question? I know a lot of you are at work. Some of you are looking at your time.
Okay, I have one. How did your parents respond to the shift in, I know you have the character card, so they still saw that, but I mean, sometimes I hear schools say that, oh, you're not giving our kids bicycles or, not giving those rewards. Did y'all have any kind of parent interaction about that?
No, we really didn't. I think we had built such a strong sort of trust with our parents over the years with our character program that there was a lot of, hey, if you say this is what is going to be helpful and this is the plan you've come up with, then go for it. We're on board with you. But that took a long time to get to that point.
Thank you. Anybody else? This is a great presentation. It's a topic that we need to talk about. Anybody else? I heard somebody.
I wanted to ask Dr. Lowry. It's the second time I've listened to him. I've taken more notes than I did the first time. But I wanted him to share with us about the buy-in piece with teachers who like to give all those little extrinsic rewards here or there, maybe sneak them in. How difficult was that for you all to have those really hard conversations about really this is what's best for kids to build those intrinsic values?
So that's a great question. And the slide that I showed from our character review was in, I believe we got that in 2012. We spent a good probably year and a half, 2 years doing just book studies, research. We had several groups that had read Carol Dweck's work I was talking about it all the time because I was in the process of working on my dissertation. So at faculty meetings or grade level meetings, we would have conversations about this as well. Another book that we read was called Igniting a Passion for Reading. It was specific to language arts, but it really dove into building intrinsic motivation specific to the language arts. So we've gone through a couple of different books there, and we had sort of a directive from the state of Alabama to implement this positive behavior sort of approach to our discipline plan. And that's really where we started having the conversations of, okay, we've learned a lot about intrinsic motivation. We know what the research says, but how are we staying true to that, to what we know is right and works, and building good character for our students, and staying true to principle 7 of the 11 principles, but also follow what we're required to do by, having some sort of positive behavior support there. So that's where the character cards came from. And that was a group of our staff that came up with that. So because it came from them, there was a lot of buy-in. And again, I don't tell that and want you to believe that 100% of our teachers always were on board with that. I'm sure, and I know there were people who were doing their own little token economy in their rooms, but the journey was not about being perfect. It was trying to build and get better every year and make progress towards that. And it took us a while to get some improvement and to show growth there.
Thank you all for being here today. I know our time is getting short and some of you have classes to get back to, but Dr. Lowry, we just thank you so much. I mean, you really took the research and just so clearly told us what the research says and how it can be applied practically. And it's like you just cracked the code for all of us to be able to help students develop that intrinsic motivation. So we truly thank you for your presentation and for your time today. And thank all of you for joining us, and we will have another coffee talk in the spring. So we look forward to getting that information to you for the spring coffee talk. But thank you so much.